They gave us one sentence: submit or vanish. The words moved across screens and airwaves. They jumped from government channels into small kitchens, into late-night radios, into classroom speakers. People read the line and felt a cold silence. The sentence was short. The meaning was not. It had the weight of a final order. The Galaxy Council spoke with a voice that had no hurry. The Council spoke with many tongues at once and with old patience. It spoke from a place beyond the bright lines of star charts. Its message was clean and official. It spoke of law and order. It spoke of consequences. It asked the humans to give up their defenses. It asked them to accept guardianship. It asked them to change who they were for the sake of peace. The cameras showed the seal of the Council. It was a ring of light around a black star, like a watchful eye over 1,000 worlds. The image did not comfort anyone on Earth. It looked distant and patient, like a judge who had already decided. News feeds called it the Ultimatum. People on the street called it a threat. The word submission tasted wrong. The word vanish made mothers hold their children closer. Markets moved. Flags at embassies flew at half-mast. The world's leaders met in rooms that were too small for the worry they kept inside. They sat under lights that felt harsh. They spoke in careful sentences. Outside those rooms, people argued. Some said the council must be obeyed. Others said they would not kneel. A scientist in Geneva put her coffee down and opened a map of orbital assets. An old fisherman in Manila kept scanning the sky with a small radio he had built from spare parts. A teenage girl in Lagos watched the broadcast and only understood one thing clearly. This was an order that touched everything. The broadcast had no pictures of guns or ships. The council did not need to show force. Its long reach was a form of power. The ruling bodies around the world moved quickly. There were emergency sessions and new orders. The council's demands were precise. They wanted military facilities dismantled. They wanted certain technologies shared. They wanted guardians on Earth who would answer to the council. They promised protection in return. The words promised safety, but safety came at the price of freedom. Across the globe, people studied the words and their layers. Some read the letter of the ultimatum. Some looked for a hidden hand. Some searched for a reason. Why Earth? Why now? The answer was not simple. The council said it was for the good of the galaxy. Some whispered that the council had reasons of power. Others believed in a simpler truth. When a stronger force meets a smaller one, it tests the smaller. The test is the first step toward control. In the first hours after the message, fear was the loudest sound. It echoed in subway tunnels and in quiet church halls. People feared the unknown. They feared losing their way of life. They feared the slow erasure of what they loved. On the other hand, fear also sharpened resolve. It made unexpected leaders stand forward. It made small actions feel like large letters in a message. Across the sea and under the mountain, a group of people met in a room that smelled like paper and warm tea. They were not generals. They were teachers, engineers, a retired diplomat, a mother who ran a small clinic, and a young programmer who had stayed up nights building radio decoders. They spread maps on the table. They ran lists. They did not only ask what weapons they had, they asked what made them human. One of them said quietly, "We must answer in a way they do not expect." Another answered, "If they want submission, we can refuse in many ways." They spoke of signals and stories. They talked about law and history and small acts of courage. They remembered songs that had calmed children in bomb shelters. They remembered the way people fed neighbors in storms. They thought of images that carried meaning without words. The world listened to its leaders. The council watched from far away. Static fields and quantum relays carried every word like glass. The time for choosing moved closer. For many, the choice was clear. For others, it felt like stepping into fog. The people who chose the fog did not do so because they did not fear. They did it because fear itself cannot be the only answer. In cities and towns, the response took shape not as a battle plan, but as something simple and stubborn. People began to collect their small proofs of life. A teacher recorded a class reading by candlelight. A baker filmed hands kneading dough. A mother took a picture of a son asleep with his arm slung over a stuffed toy. These were not weapons. They were not solutions for war. They were the quiet proof that lives wore names and stories, not numbers or assets. Reporters moved through neighborhoods with cameras. They asked questions that sounded too small for the crisis. "What is a day like for you?" they asked. A quiet man who had been a mechanic for 40 years reached into a box and pulled out a photograph. He had taken it years ago. A child asleep on a blanket, a small hand tucked under a chin. He had not thought the photograph would travel beyond a family album. Now the photograph was a document, a thing that argued not with steel but with truth. The council's diplomats did not expect images to matter. In their long history, treaties and fleets had been the language of power. They believed a small, weak species would bend before a law made by 1,000 worlds. What they did not know was how human things act like a mirror. A photograph can show not only a face but a life. A lullaby can cross the space between stars and land on ears that had never heard one. The council had never learned to read these small things as defiance. On the street outside a television studio, someone spray-painted a phrase on a broken wall. It read, "We are not a map to be erased." The words were messy and the paint dripped. They were not the kind of protest that earned headlines in polite papers. Still, someone took a picture of it. That picture moved through networks. It landed on screens in distant offices and surprised those who believed only in strategies of force. As the hours passed, the urgency shifted from panic to resolve. People still feared the power that sat beyond their skies, yet a new idea spread. Perhaps the only honest answer would be a human one. Perhaps the proof of life, of mess, of song, would be the clearest refusal of being reduced. The council had asked for submission. The world considered reply by showing what could not be taken without a cost. Their stories, their songs, their small, stubborn acts of care. In small rooms and large halls, leaders debated. They argued over the right tone. Some wanted a defiant war cry. Others wanted quiet dignity. The room that met under the mountain chose a plain thing. They would not answer with guns. They would answer with an image and a phrase. The image would be a photograph of a child asleep. The phrase would be simple and sharp. Teach her well. It was not a surrender. It was not a challenge. It was a request and a shield. It asked the viewer to consider the child, and through the child to consider a life. When the message left Earth's networks, it did not go with fanfare. It moved like a whisper into the council's long halls. For a moment, those halls filled with delegates who had seen empires fall and rise grew quiet. The photograph was small. The sentence was small. Yet both had a strange weight. On Earth, people watched the feed and waited. They had sent not a soldier but a truth. They had chosen to speak plainly about what mattered. The world did not know if the council would be moved. The world only knew that it had sent a message that showed who they were. The ultimatum had asked for submission or erasure. The reply showed a face. It put a single human life at the center of a choice. The airwaves fell silent for a long time. The photograph hung in 1,000 minds. The small hand under the blanket seemed to hold a question that reached to the stars. They waited. After the photograph left Earth's networks, the world held its breath. The message moved through wires, through satellites, into the deep channels the council used. It crossed cold vacuum and hot rumor. On Earth, people watched screens and listened to radios. They replayed the photo in their heads. They watched the small hand on the blanket and tried to read the question it held. In the council's halls, the photograph was a small, bright thing on a long table. Delegates leaned toward it as if the light could warm them. They had seen whole worlds fall silent under their law. They had not seen a picture that could make a chamber still. For a long time, no one spoke. When they did, their voices were careful. The head of security said bluntly that the photograph was nothing but a trick. He wanted to test Earth's defenses and, if needed, strike. The head of diplomacy argued the opposite. She said the image gave them a chance to win friends rather than subjects. She feared the cost of force would be higher than anyone measured. Around them, younger delegates asked what the child meant to them. They had not lived with the smallness of human days. To them, life was often a point on a ledger. On Earth, the small group under the mountain watched the council's silence on shared feeds that slipped past filters. They had not expected the photograph to stop anyone. They had hoped only to remind the council that a life was at stake. Now they watched the reaction grow like a storm. Ambassador Kira Hale sat with her hands folded. She was not a soldier. She had taught history at a small university before the council's shadow grew near. Her hair had silver streaks. Her voice was soft, but it held the sort of steadiness people followed. She had chosen the photograph with slow care. She had written the phrase, "Teach her well." She had not meant it to be a weapon. She had meant it to be a test. Kira listened as the group around her argued. The young programmer Omar spoke fast and bright. He wanted to flood the council's channels with human voices. They listen to their own law, he said. If we give them life in many languages, they will not treat us as a problem. They will see we are people. An older woman, Lena, who ran a clinic in a small town, looked tired but fierce. She said, "They can call it a trick. But we have lived tricks. We have also lived songs. Songs reach places power cannot." Lena's hands were rough from work. She kept them folded as if holding a bowl. The room smelled of tea and paper and a little fear. They built the plan piece by small piece. It was not a plan for battle. It was a plan to speak. They would send voices, not bombs. They would send what made a life a life. They would thread simple things into the council's networks. The sound of a kettle boiling, a child learning to say a new word, a woman humming while she mends a sock. They would send home videos and recordings. Each piece would say, "We are here. We are messy and loving and weak and brave." Engineers agreed to change old weather satellites so they carried human signals instead of maps. They worked fast. The young programmer Omar wrote code that stealthed the stream so that the council's relays would carry them directly into the halls and to the public feeds on far worlds. A small factory in Ohio repurposed transmitters. A radio club in Prague found ancient, forgotten channels and retuned them. In Lagos, a teacher recorded her class reading a simple poem. In Manila, the fisherman added his low song of the sea. In dozens of places, small teams made recordings that felt like fumbling hands reaching for a rural light switch. The sounds were not polished. They did not need to be. They were true. The world watched as a global chorus took shape. It was like a quilt made from many scraps. Each piece held a small light. The team called the project Whisper. They meant it as a joke. A whisper could cross a room, but they hoped this whisper might cross a galaxy. On the council worlds, the first stream slipped into the public feed during a quiet hour. A delegate on an outer ring paused his morning and heard a child reciting numbers in a voice that trembled. Another heard a woman singing a lullaby that spoke of boiled rice and broken toys. A young technician watched a video of a man tying a shoe and laughed out loud. The laughter was small and then it spread. The feeds were not forceful. They were familiar. Not everyone in the council's halls felt moved. The head of security called the transmissions contamination. He wanted to block them and punish the senders. He said the sounds were selected to provoke. He wanted to isolate Earth and then make an example. A group of old expansionists supported him. They had grown up on the idea that power must be shown to be believed. To them, music was weak armor, but the public spoke in a different language. Citizens on many worlds saw the streams. They felt unfamiliar feelings. Some felt curiosity. Others felt pity. More felt shame. They had lived under the confidence that their council kept order. They had not thought about what order meant for a small, stubborn species like humans. Now they listened. A leak changed the mood further. Someone in the council's enforcement branch sent a file to a public archive. At first, the file looked like a small, dry report. Then readers saw the plan inside. An operation that could clear cities and servers without firing a single visible shot. It was precise. It had a name that made no one proud. In the council's own legal code, the operation showed an intent to remove problems before they could spread. The public saw a planner's calm and not a statesman's mercy. Anger rose on worlds that had trusted the council to be just. Citizens protested in market squares on planets of silver sky and low grass. They carried signs with simple words translated into many forms, "Not in our name." The leaks and the human voices moved together like two currents that fed a larger tide. Back in the mountain room, people watched the news and the protests with a breathless mix of hope and worry. Kira kept her head low and took slow sips of cold tea. She felt the weight of the child's face in her memory. The world had sent a photograph and a sentence. The council had begun to crack. Yet Kira knew cracks could close. A wall could be patched with new lies and a new law. The work after the crack was the hardest. The Whisper project kept sending. The team added more sounds. They added silence too. Long moments that let listeners fill the air with their own thoughts. They sent a recorded argument between two neighbors about a borrowed ladder. They sent a small film of a child making mud pies and insisting they were the finest cakes in town. They sent a recording of an old soldier teaching a girl to fix a broken radio. Each piece was small and stubborn. A reporter in a distant city asked a question on live feed that changed how many listened. The reporter asked, "If you had to choose one thing to show the council what makes your life worth living, what would it be?" People answered with short clips. They showed birthdays, broken teeth, a hand that refused to let go. The answer was often the same: small things stitched together. The sum sounded like a promise. As the stream spread, not everyone grew kind. Some leaders on Earth wanted to use the moment to gain arms and to bargain from fear. They argued for displays of force. The old fisherman in Manila told the group under the mountain that force would only make the council's head of security right. Lena, the clinic woman, said quietly that force would make the child in the photo someone else's ledger. Kira listened and then chose the careful path. She knew a single photograph had cracked the council. A flood of human life might finish the crack, or it might harden into another kind of wall. The council's next moves would decide the shape of what came. The whispers had done more than anyone guessed. They had touched ears that had longer memories than charts of conquest. They had asked a question the council was not ready to answer. Is authority enough without consent? For people on Earth, the weight stretched. They had given their face to a choice. They had spun a chorus into the cold. They had shown a child asleep and asked the stars to look and to choose. Now the world watched and listened for the council's answer. Far beyond, the council sent its own delegation to study Earth. They did not go with guns in their hands. They came with questions. They watched the streams and cataloged faces. They learned the name Kira Hale and wondered how one life could change a law that had lasted for millennia. The photograph still sat in many minds like a small lamp. It showed a child, a blanket, a hand. It had been a simple thing. Simple things, Kira thought while she stared at an old photograph on the table, can be the hardest things to answer. The silence after Earth's reply stretched like a shadow across two worlds. On Earth, families leaned close to radios, screens, and half-working projectors, waiting for the council to speak again. In orbit, satellites blinked and whispered their stolen signals out into the dark. And far away, in the gleaming council chamber, the photograph still glowed in the air. A child asleep, small fingers curled into a fist. The council's chamber was older than most nations on Earth. It was a place of glass and stone that caught starlight and made it burn in thin lines across the floor. Delegates from thousands of worlds sat in curved ranks. Some of them were made of flesh, some of crystal, some of light held together by careful machines. They all watched the same photograph. The head of security broke the silence first. His voice was low and heavy, like iron being struck. "A trick," he said. "A species facing death reaches for pity. They will buy time. They will spread confusion. Earth must be removed before their sentiment spreads." His words were sharp, but not everyone nodded. The diplomatic chair, a tall figure with skin like woven silver, leaned forward. "A trick?" she asked. "Or a mirror? Perhaps the humans are not asking for pity. Perhaps they are daring us to look at them as more than numbers. If we strike them down after this, we will not look strong. We will look cruel." The chamber stirred. Some agreed. Others frowned. On Earth, in the mountain room, Ambassador Kira Hale listened to these reports as they trickled back through hidden channels. Her fingers tapped the wooden table. She was not smiling, but there was a kind of quiet pride in her eyes. The photograph had not been ignored. It had unsettled. That was the first step, but she knew unsettling was not enough. The council would recover. They would find their certainty again unless Earth pressed harder. Not with weapons. With something colder, sharper, Kira turned to Omar, the young programmer. "We can't stop now," she said. The picture opened a door. "Now we must step through it." Omar's face lit up, quick and restless. "Then we send more. We don't send speeches. We send truths they can't measure. Stories, sounds, proof of our lives." Lena, the clinic worker, frowned. "But if we pour out everything, won't they twist it? Won't they use our words against us?" "They might," Kira admitted. "But silence would be worse. Silence would make us shadows. A shadow can be erased. A voice cannot." So the plan grew. The group began to gather voices. They called the project Whisper, not because it was weak, but because a whisper in the right ear can change a whole room. A teacher in Nairobi recorded her students reciting a poem about rain. A baker in New York filmed his hands kneading bread. An old soldier in Warsaw sang the tune he used to whistle when he patched broken radios. A boy in Karachi laughed as he tried to balance on one leg and fell over. Each sound, each picture, each laugh, they were strung together into signals. Omar's code bent the satellites to carry them. The transmissions slipped past the council's filters, dressed as harmless weather data. And soon, in the quiet homes of faraway worlds, alien families began to hear Earth. A mother of 3 on Laris Prime paused when her children asked her to play the cake song again, a recording of a human child pretending mud pies were desserts. A student on Veyron listened to the voice of a human farmer describing dawn in the fields, and felt something in her chest tighten. A young council aide who had never heard laughter like Earth's stopped working and simply listened. The head of security grew angrier. Infection, he called it. Cut the channels. Silence them. But it was too late. The whisper had spread too far. The council could block, but they could not erase what had already been heard. Back on Earth, Kira studied the reports. The council was divided. Old powers wanted to strike. Younger delegates wanted to pause. Citizens on alien worlds had begun asking questions their leaders did not like. Kira whispered to herself, "Good. Let them argue. Let them hesitate. Every hour they hesitate, we grow stronger." Her plan was not about strength in numbers or ships. It was about time. Time for the world to speak. Time for the galaxy to listen. That night in the mountain room, they sent their boldest message yet. Not a photograph. Not a lullaby. This time, it was a simple sentence broadcast in 20 languages, repeated until the signal burned itself into the council's networks. We do not kneel. We do not vanish. We are human. Teach us well. The sentence rang across stars like a cold bell. In the chamber of the council, where power had always been certain, silence fell again. Delegates looked at one another, their eyes unsettled. For the first time in 1,000 years, an ultimatum had been met not with fear, but with a reply that could not be ignored. The mountain room was quiet. The only sound was the soft hum of old machines and the tapping of Ambassador Kira Hale's pen against the table. The others watched her. They were waiting for her to speak. At last, she looked up at the tired faces around her. "Do you know why I chose a photograph?" she asked. Her voice was calm, but it carried weight. No one answered right away. Omar, the young programmer, shifted in his chair. Lena, the clinic worker, folded her hands on the table. The silence stretched until Kira filled it herself. "Because words can be twisted," she said. "Because speeches can sound like tricks. But a photograph is simple. It does not argue. It does not explain. It only shows what is real." She slid the small picture across the table. The child asleep under the old blanket looked peaceful, unaware of the burden her image now carried. Lena's eyes softened. "She looks like my grandson," she whispered. Omar leaned forward. "But why that child? Why not a soldier or a family or a city skyline? Something bigger, something stronger." Kira shook her head. "Because the council sees soldiers every day. They see armies, treaties, fleets. None of that will move them. What they have forgotten is the small things, the things that make life worth defending. A sleeping child is not a symbol of power. She is a symbol of future. She is what every empire, every law, every council is meant to protect. By showing her, we remind them what they risk destroying." The group fell quiet again. Even Omar, who always spoke fast, had nothing to add. Kira tapped the photograph once more. "Creatures who think like gods forget what it means to be mortal. This picture forces them to remember. It pulls them down to the ground. It disarms authority not with defiance but with humanity." Far across the galaxy, the photograph had already begun to stir whispers of its own. In the council chamber, the image had been replayed hundreds of times. Some delegates dismissed it with a wave of their jeweled hands. Others stared at it longer than they admitted. A few could not look away. On the trade world of Veyron, a junior delegate carried a copy of the image back to his quarters. He placed it on his desk and sat staring at it. He had grown up in a sterile city where even laughter was scheduled. He had never seen a child sleeping so peacefully, wrapped in a blanket that looked worn but loved. That night, when he finally closed his own eyes, he dreamed of a lullaby he had never heard before. On the waterworld of Theron, a merchant family gathered in their home. Their youngest child pointed to the human photograph on the feed and asked, "Why is she sleeping?" The parents did not know what to answer. They found themselves speaking softly, as if afraid to disturb the child in the picture. The photograph traveled without ships. It crossed minds faster than fleets could move, and everywhere it landed it made people think of things they had forgotten. Hunger, lullabies, scraped knees, and the simple truth that all life begins small. Back in the mountain room, Lena finally spoke. "Do you think they will listen?" Kira's gaze was steady. "Not all of them. Some will mock it. Some will call it weak. But not all. Somewhere in that chamber, someone will remember what it means to care for something fragile. And once one remembers, others will follow. Doubt spreads quickly when it is born of truth." Omar frowned. "But what if the council hardens instead? What if they see the photo as a game? What if they strike to prove we cannot sway them?" Kira sighed, her shoulders heavy. "Then they strike. But even then, the photograph will remain. It will move through their people. It will take root in their doubts. They can erase buildings, but they cannot erase the seed of empathy once it is planted." Lena reached across the table and touched the photo with one finger, almost reverently. "You think one child's face can change the course of the galaxy?" Kira gave a small, sad smile. "I think one child's face can remind the galaxy that we are not numbers, not problems to be erased. We are stories. We are futures. That is harder to destroy than any wall of steel." Meanwhile, in the council chamber, the debate deepened. The head of security banged his fist on the table. "This is manipulation. They want to weaken us with sentiment. End this charade before it spreads further." But the diplomatic chair shook her head. "No, this is not a weapon. It is a plea. If we destroy them after such a plea, what will our people say of us? We will not look strong. We will look monstrous." Her words rippled through the chamber. Several younger delegates shifted uneasily. Some of them had children. Some of them had memories they had long buried. For the first time in centuries, the council was not of one voice. In small homes across alien worlds, the photograph became more than an image. It became a question. Citizens looked at it and asked themselves, "If this child were mine, would I want her to vanish?" And slowly the council began to feel the pressure. Not from fleets, not from weapons, but from their own people. Back on Earth, Kira closed her eyes for a moment and allowed herself to breathe. The plan had been simple, almost foolish. A picture, a phrase, a whisper, and yet it was working. She opened her eyes and looked at the group. This is only the beginning. The council is shaken, but they will fight to regain control. We must not stop here. We must keep reminding them of the small things, again and again until they cannot forget. Omar nodded quickly. Then we'll send more. Not speeches. Not threats. Just life. The sound of a child laughing. The taste of bread in the morning. A neighbor knocking on the door. We'll make them see what they stand to erase. Kira picked up the photograph one last time and held it in the light. "A single image can open a door," she said softly. "Now we must decide how far we are willing to walk through it." And far away in the quiet hours of alien nights, more and more eyes turned to the sleeping child. Some frowned, some wept, some simply stared. The Galaxy Council had issued an ultimatum. Submit or vanish. But humanity's reply, small, fragile, and stubborn, was beginning to unravel the certainty of empires. The council chamber, a vast circle of stone and light, had always been a place of unity. For centuries, voices rose in harmony. Decisions were made with iron certainty, and no empire dared question their decrees. But now the chamber was no longer one voice. It was a storm. The photograph floated in the center of the hall, projected large enough for every delegate to see. The child's small chest rose and fell as she slept. Her tiny hand curled against her cheek. A single blanket covered her, worn but warm. "Enough," thundered the head of security, a massive reptilian delegate whose scales gleamed under the chamber lights. "This is a trick. Humans dangle sentiment to soften us. They know they cannot stand against our fleets, so they weaponize weakness. If we hesitate, if we delay our strike, we invite defiance from every corner of the galaxy." His words shook the chamber. Many delegates pounded the tables in agreement. But not all. The diplomatic chair, a tall being with translucent skin that shimmered like glass, rose slowly. Her voice was soft, but every syllable carried. "You call this weakness? Look again. That child does not beg. She does not fight. She simply exists. And yet she unsettles you more than fleets or missiles ever could. Why? Because she is the truth. Because she is life itself. To destroy her would not be strength. It would be fear," whispers spread. Some nodded. Others scowled. On the upper tiers, younger delegates shifted uncomfortably. Many had grown up after the Great Wars in cities of peace and order. They had never questioned the Council's authority, but now, for the first time, they wondered. One, a slender avian from the Rim colonies, leaned toward his neighbor. My hatchling. She sleeps just like that, small, helpless. What kind of justice is it to erase a species that holds its children as we do? His neighbor, older and hardened, hissed. Do not let sentiment blind you. This is survival. Unity demands sacrifice. But the young delegate could not tear his eyes from the photo. Outside the chamber, the photograph was spreading faster than orders could suppress it. On the merchant world of Giara, screens showed the image in the middle of crowded markets. Buyers and sellers paused in their bargaining. Children tugged at their parents' sleeves, pointing at the human child. On the mining colonies, workers carried the picture in their data slates, passing it hand to hand, whispering she could be ours. And on worlds where the Council's grip was weaker, protests had already begun. Citizens filled squares, chanting not for war but for mercy. Some held copies of the image high above their heads. Inside the chamber, the debate grew sharper. A delegate from the industrial guilds rose, his metal-clad frame gleaming. If we allow humanity to defy us, others will rise. Chaos will spread. We must end this now. But another voice cut through, an elder from the water clans, her body shimmering like flowing waves. And if we strike them down, what then? Do you not feel it? The doubt in your own people? Strike the humans and you will not silence them. You will inflame them. You will teach the galaxy that the Council fears the weak. The chamber erupted in shouts. Some slammed fists in fury. Others argued for restraint. For the first time, there was no clear majority. In a quiet corner of the chamber, the archivist, keeper of history, spoke for the first time in centuries. His voice was dry like crumbling stone. I have seen empires rise and fall. Always they believed themselves unbreakable. Always they thought fear would bind their subjects forever. But fear is brittle. Once cracked, it spreads and the whole structure falls. Tell me, Council, do you not hear the crack? His words settled over the chamber like dust. Far away on Earth, Kira Hale received fragments of intercepted transmissions. Reports of protests, of hesitation, of arguments in the chamber. She listened, her face unreadable. Omar grinned wide. It's working. They're breaking apart. But Kira raised a hand. Do not celebrate too soon. A wounded empire may lash out harder than a whole one. Their unity is cracking, yes, but cracks can either lead to collapse or to rage. Lena touched the photo gently as if steadying herself. Then what do we do now? Kira's eyes were sharp. We wait, we watch, and when the moment comes when their doubt outweighs their pride, we will press harder, until the Council itself must choose between cruelty and collapse. And in the chamber, the debate raged on, no longer over whether to destroy humanity, but over what it meant to rule. The ultimatum had been clear, submit or vanish. But now, for the first time, the Council was unsure of its own command, and the sleeping child, silent and unaware, held the future of an empire in her tiny, resting hand. Earth did not raise weapons. It did not launch fleets or fire missiles. Instead, it whispered. The mountain room, dim and cluttered with old maps and humming machines, was alive with quiet activity. Screens blinked with feeds from around the globe, small microphones captured children's laughter, and old radios crackled to life with the sounds of everyday human life. Omar leaned over the console. They've blocked some channels, but it doesn't matter. Too many signals are moving too fast. Every world is hearing us. Kira Hale nodded. Exactly. They think silence will make us small. They think they can control perception. But the Council forgot one thing. A human life is loud, even when it whispers. Across the Council's empire, signals from Earth began to ripple outward like a gentle tide at first, then faster and stronger. The Whisper Project had become a chorus. A farmer's voice from Argentina described sunrise over golden fields. A teacher from Lagos read poetry aloud while children hummed behind her. A baker in Boston filmed dough being kneaded. A soldier in Warsaw whistled an old tune while repairing a radio. These small, everyday moments were collected, streamed, and broadcast into the Council's networks. The Council's young delegates were the first to notice. They paused in meetings, in corridors and quarters as the broadcasts found them. They heard humans laughing, arguing, celebrating, even struggling, and a strange feeling settled over them. Unease, curiosity, and a growing doubt. The older delegates scoffed. Noise, they said. Interference, insignificant. Block it. But for some, the broadcasts were impossible to ignore. The photograph of the sleeping child had already unsettled them. Now these sounds and images confirmed it. Humans were not pawns. They were life. And life, messy, stubborn, noisy, was dangerous in ways no fleet could measure. On the outer worlds of the Council, civilians began to whisper back. At first it was small murmurs in crowded markets. Then, on public forums, on broadcasts meant for commerce and entertainment, citizens began speaking. Do we really follow blindly? If we destroy them, what of the children? I have a niece. I see myself in that photograph. Protests erupted on dozens of planets. People held copies of the human child's photograph. They chanted quietly, but their voices carried. Enforcers were sent to stop them, but the protests multiplied faster than the council could respond. Each act of suppression created more witnesses, more sympathy, and more doubt. In the council chamber, delegates argued heatedly. The head of security slammed his clawed hand against the table. Do you see what your indecision has wrought? They have spread fear of weakness among our people. They challenge us not with weapons, but with life. End this now. The diplomatic chair raised her hand. Do you not see? Their strength lies in what they will not fight to destroy. The council cannot respond with force without proving our cruelty. Their whispers have already reached the hearts of our citizens. If we strike, we will fracture more than humanity. We will fracture ourselves. Shouts echoed through the chamber. The divisions were raw and exposed. The council's history of unity was now chaos. For the first time in millennia, no one voice could command the others. Back on Earth, Kira watched these reports with a mix of caution and determination. They hesitate. She said softly, the council hesitates because our voices carry weight they cannot measure. They hesitate because our lives matter to someone, even to their own people. That is our opening, Lena frowned. But what if they strike anyway? Even if some protest, they are powerful. They could still destroy us. Kira shook her head. They will strike only if they believe it is the only choice. And right now, the choice is not clear. We will not give them clarity. We will make them confront life itself. And life is never fully conquerable. Omar adjusted a transmitter. Then we push harder. More voices. More stories. More human life. Let them hear it everywhere. Let them feel it. Let them remember that humanity cannot vanish quietly. Signals went out again, stronger and bolder. The voices of teachers, bakers, soldiers, children, and mothers poured into council networks. Every feed, every channel, every relay carried a small spark of human existence. Across alien worlds, civilians paused to listen. A young girl on Laris Prime stopped studying the council's history and pressed her hand to the screen. They are just like us, she whispered. An older merchant on Theron shook his head. We cannot destroy them. How can we? The head of security's anger boiled, but the pressure only grew. His enforcers attempted to suppress signals, but the broadcasts were too many, too scattered, and too human. The more he tried, the more the alien citizens resisted. In trying to silence Earth, he had sparked a rebellion in perception. The council was cracking. Its confidence, built over thousands of years, was faltering. Humanity had not fired a shot, had not threatened, had not wielded any force the council understood. Yet the Empire's certainty was shivering like a fragile glass, and at the center of it all was a photograph, a child asleep, and the knowledge that life, stubborn and ordinary, could be a weapon the council had never learned to fight. Kira looked around the mountain room. She smiled faintly. They have begun to doubt themselves. That is the first victory. The next will be harder, Omar grinned. Then let's keep whispering. And the whispers rose again, stronger than before, echoing across the stars. We do not kneel. We do not vanish. We are human. Teach us well. The council's chamber was no longer just a place of orders and certainty. It had become a courtroom of conscience. Delegates argued, whispered, and stared at the photograph that floated before them like a silent judge. The child's small, sleeping face held no weapons. No power, no demand. Yet it had undone centuries of control. The head of security, the fiercest voice of authority, paced along the curved floor, claws clicking. "They mock us with innocence," he roared. "We are rulers. We are justice. Do you not see the danger?" But some delegates did see it, the danger, but in a way the head of security could not. The diplomatic chair, her skin shimmering like spun glass, raised her voice once more. "No, the danger is not humanity. The danger is us. We have forgotten what it means to value life over law. And this photograph reminds us." A murmur spread across the chamber. The younger delegates, many with children of their own, shifted uneasily. For the first time, they imagined a universe where authority was questioned, not enforced. One of them, a slender, feathered diplomat from the Rim colonies, spoke quietly. I cannot erase what I see. They sleep like my hatchling, helpless and trusting. If we strike, what do we become?" Another, an elder of crystalline form, nodded slowly. "We have spoken of laws, of order, of compliance. But in this image I see life, and life asks questions that no law can answer." The room was divided. The debate turned inward as much as outward. Every delegate who had not yet considered the human perspective felt the stirrings of doubt. Questions they had buried under centuries of law and conquest now rose unbidden. What is our purpose? What is power if it destroys innocence? Meanwhile, the civilians on distant worlds were listening. The photograph and the growing chorus of human whispers had become a symbol of resistance, of life's stubborn insistence on existence. In the bustling squares of the trade world of Jayara, protesters carried copies of the sleeping child's image. They chanted quietly but with conviction, "Life matters. We will not erase. Even the smallest voice has weight." Enforcers tried to push them back, to intimidate them with weapons of authority. Yet each time a hand was raised against the civilians, the human broadcast played louder. A child's laugh, a teacher's poem, a mother humming softly to her infant. The human acts of care in everyday life clashed with the tools of power. For many citizens, the council's authority began to crumble under the weight of empathy. In the council chamber, the head of security slammed his clawed fist onto the table again, furious. "Do you see what you have allowed? They spread rebellion without a single battle." The diplomatic chair, unshaken, replied, "Not rebellion, awareness, doubt, understanding. What you call weakness is the spark of conscience." From the upper tiers, young delegates whispered to one another. "We cannot fight them with force," said one. "If we do, our people will rise against us. They have already seen the truth in the small, stubborn lives of humans." An elder delegate of metal and stone raised a clawed hand. "We have not known what it is to be questioned like this. They do not attack us. They remind us of ourselves, of what we were, of what we could still be." On Earth, Kira Hale watched the reports pour in. Aliens arguing, protests growing, citizens refusing to comply blindly. She felt a quiet satisfaction, but not triumph. Humanity had not yet won anything. But the seeds were planted. Doubt once inside a mind cannot be entirely removed. "They hesitate," she said softly to Lena and Omar. "The council's certainty is fractured. Every human story we send makes that fracture wider." Lena frowned, still cautious. "And if they close ranks? If they decide to strike while the doubt spreads?" Kira's gaze was steady. "Then we have already won something. Even if they strike, the ripple has begun. Our voices have reached hearts beyond our reach. Authority cannot erase that." And the ripple continued. Across distant planets, citizens paused in their daily routines to watch human broadcasts. The small everyday acts of life, a loaf of bread, a child learning to read, a neighbor helping another, were impossible to ignore. They spoke to something universal, something that law, fleet, and punishment could never suppress. A young girl on the industrial world of Veyrun held a tablet to her chest. "They are alive. They are like us," she whispered, and the whisper passed through the crowd, spreading doubt like a gentle wind. The council's delegates could block signals, issue decrees, and threaten enforcers, but they could not block empathy. They could not erase life. And with every broadcast, every whisper, every small human act, the galaxy began to question the meaning of obedience. Back in the mountain room, Kira looked at the small group. Omar's eyes sparkled with excitement. Lena still appeared worried but attentive. "They are listening," Kira said quietly. "They see what they cannot destroy. They are beginning to understand that humanity is not just a problem to be solved." Omar grinned. "Then we keep sending. More stories, More voices. More life, Kira nodded. Exactly. The battle is no longer weapons. It is understanding and life. Life cannot be erased quietly. The sleeping child remained in the photograph untouched, unaware. Yet in her quiet slumber, she held more power than fleets. Fleets that stretched across stars. She had become a symbol, a reminder that life, no matter how small, could challenge certainty, crack authority, and spark conscience across the galaxy. And the Council, once unshakable, had begun to fracture under the simple truth of humanity's existence. The Council's chamber had never felt this tense. For millennia, debates ended with certainty, with a plan executed and a fleet ready to enforce it. But now uncertainty ruled. The photograph of the sleeping child floated at the center like a silent judge. Its presence was subtle but undeniable. The head of security slammed a clawed hand against the table. We have hesitated long enough. These humans spread chaos without a single weapon. They must be silenced, permanently. A wave of assent went through half the chamber. Fists pounded, claws clicked, and lights flickered along the walls. Orders were drawn, fleets prepared. The Council decided to strike, not directly at humanity's cities, but at their communications, their satellites, their networks. Cut their whispers. Break their signals. Show them that the Council could not be mocked. The diplomatic chair stood firm. Be cautious. Their strength is not in fleets or machines. Every attack against them risks alienating our citizens further. If you block the whispers, you will only make their message stronger. Every life you try to erase becomes proof of their warning. The head of security snarled. We cannot afford hesitation. Do you want to be remembered as the Council that allowed a single species to dictate our actions? Back on Earth, Kira Hale watched the alerts flood in. The Council was striking. Satellites flickered. Networks interrupted. Some channels went dark entirely. The world tensed, expecting bombs, fleets, or worse. Omar's hands flew across the console. They're trying to cut us off. They think silence will erase us. Kira's eyes were calm. Then we will adapt. Humanity has always survived worse than silence. We do not rely on one channel, one satellite, or one network. We will find a way through. And they did. The Whisper Project had already anticipated interference. Backups were hidden in old radios, amateur transmitters, encrypted subchannels, and even simple recordings passed hand to hand. When one network failed, another carried the signal. When a satellite was jammed, signals bounced through weather arrays and communication satellites long thought obsolete. The human messages spread faster, quieter, and more stubborn than the Council could suppress. Teachers read poems in classrooms. Mothers hummed lullabies. Farmers described sunrises. Each small act of life became a countermeasure, a proof that humanity could not vanish quietly. Across the galaxy, the effect was immediate. Citizens on alien worlds already influenced by the whispers noticed the Council's countermeasures. Why are they trying to silence them? A young student on Verun asked. They only speak of life. Why is the Council afraid? Protests grew louder. Signals of humanity, once thought isolated to Earth, were now being discussed openly. Conversations in markets, forums, and homes questioned the Council's actions. If humanity can survive our strikes without weapons, what kind of power do they have? The head of security grew furious. He ordered fleets to patrol the edges of human space, trying to intimidate without attacking cities. Drones flew near communication hubs. Satellites attempted jamming. Yet every attempt backfired. Each disruption became a story, a proof of survival. A new broadcast showing humans adapting, rebuilding, and continuing their course. In the mountain room, Kira smiled faintly. They think force can erase life, but they are forgetting the most important rule: life persists. Life finds a way, Omar nodded. Every channel we lose, we've already backed up 10 more. They can't cut us off completely. Lena leaned over a console watching a live feed from a small village in India. Children were laughing, singing, and recording their voices. Even in areas the Council thought vulnerable, humanity's presence was alive, growing, spreading. Every attempt to silence us makes the story stronger, Kira said softly. Every strike they plan becomes part of the chorus we are sending to the galaxy. In the Council chamber, doubt had grown into fear. The head of security, usually unshakable, now paced frantically. They cannot be contained. Our strikes only amplify them. How can this be? The diplomatic chair observed calmly. Because they are alive. Life cannot be erased by force, and the galaxy is beginning to see it. Every alien citizen who hears humanity's story questions us, not them. Every attempt to suppress is proof of our fear, not theirs, a young delegate whispered to a neighbor, trembling. They survive without fleets, without weapons. How can we rule a species like that? The chamber, once united in confidence, was fractured. Authority had met empathy, and empathy was stronger than steel. On Earth, Kira leaned back. She watched the Council's fleets moving in the distance, signals being jammed, satellites blinking out. And yet humanity's whispers continued. We are human, she said softly to the room. We adapt, we endure. We survive, and this is the most powerful weapon we have. Omar grinned. Then let's keep whispering. And humanity did. Across the stars, whispers of life, laughter, and love continued to flow. A species unarmed yet unstoppable was teaching the galaxy an entirely new kind of power. That existence itself, persistent and resilient, can be the most formidable resistance of all. The Council's strike had failed. Humanity had endured, and for the first time, doubt had entered the hearts of the galaxy's rulers. The galaxy was stirring. For centuries, the Council's word had been absolute. Planets obeyed, trade flowed, and dissent was rare, swiftly crushed. But now the photograph of a human child, the whispered voices of 1,000 lives had sparked something new. A quiet but unstoppable rebellion. It began in small ways. Citizens on outer worlds hesitated when enforcers approached. Merchants in marketplaces refused to broadcast council decrees. Children whispered questions their parents did not expect. Why do we obey blindly? Are they not alive like us? On the industrial planet of Veyrun, a massive protest formed in the city's main square. Thousands gathered, holding up screens that displayed the sleeping child, accompanied by recordings of human life. A mother singing, a farmer speaking of sunrise, children learning to read. The enforcers arrived, armored and threatening, but the crowd stood firm. They could not be silenced. The rebellion spread faster than the council anticipated. On the water world of Theron, citizens sabotaged communication relays that would have blocked human transmissions. On Laris Prime, students organized mass readings of human poetry in public forums. Across dozens of planets, a single question repeated in every language. Why do we obey authority when life itself resists it? Inside the council chamber, the division was now a chasm. The head of security slammed his fist on the table. Do you see what they have done? Without a single weapon, without fleets, without fire, humanity has turned our citizens against us. If we do not act, this rebellion will spread to every world under our control. You cannot fight them with force, countered the diplomatic chair, her translucent form glowing faintly in the chamber's dim light. They are not fighting. They are existing. And existence is contagious. Every attempt to destroy them only makes others see what you are, not what they are. Younger delegates whispered among themselves. Many of them had never questioned the council's authority before. Now they wondered if obedience was worth more than life itself. Doubt had become a spark, and the spark was catching fire. On Earth, Kira Hale monitored the rebellion's growth across the stars. The Whisper Project had grown beyond her wildest expectations. The Council's citizens were now openly defying their leaders, inspired by humanity's simple acts of life. They are responding, Omar said, eyes wide. Humans are winning, without a single strike. Kira's face was calm, but her mind raced. This is the turning point. The Council's control is unraveling, but the galaxy is still fragile. One wrong move from the head of security, one act of desperation, and it could all collapse violently. We must guide them carefully. Lena leaned forward. What do you suggest? More whispers? More broadcasts? Kira nodded. Exactly. But this time we push further. Not just life, but unity. We show the Council the galaxy itself is aligned with humanity's truth. Every planet, every citizen, every act of defiance strengthens our position. Signals spread faster than fleets. The sleeping child's photograph appeared on every public screen across hundreds of worlds. Human voices intertwined with alien ones, citizens narrating their own acts of life, questioning authority and demanding recognition. Farmers on icy moons described morning routines. Children on desert worlds recited poems with Earth's verses. Elders on ocean planets hummed lullabies alongside human songs. The galaxy was no longer silent. Humanity's simple acts of life had become the anthem of rebellion, and the Council's authority was weakening under the weight of conscience. In the council chamber, panic began to spread. The head of security bellowed orders for fleets to enforce compliance, but many captains refused, citing the loyalty of their citizens to the human cause. Young delegates, inspired by what they saw, openly defied commands. The diplomatic chair observed quietly, her expression unwavering. "Do you see? The galaxy itself has chosen. It is not humanity that strikes fear. It is life that strikes fear. Force cannot suppress it." The chamber was fractured. Authority was crumbling, and rebellion was growing, not with weapons but with awareness, empathy, and simple acts of existence. On Earth, Kira addressed her team, calm but resolute. The Council is no longer the master of the galaxy. They are the observers of a truth they cannot control. Humanity has survived fleets, strikes, and attempts at silencing. Now we will show them the final truth, that life itself cannot be commanded. It can only be respected. Omar grinned. Then let's make it impossible for them to ignore. Lena, still cautious but determined, added, "We will push the galaxy to choose, not through fear, but through the simple fact that humanity exists and refuses to vanish quietly." The galaxy had begun to awaken. Citizens defied orders. Aliens whispered among themselves. Humanity's life, small yet resolute, had sown doubt, empathy, and rebellion across the stars. And in the center of it all, the sleeping child's photograph remained, silent and powerful, holding the fragile balance between the Council's fear and the galaxy's conscience. The final act was near. Humanity's nonviolent resistance had brought the Council to its knees. Now the choice was theirs: continue to fight against life itself, or finally learn to respect it. The Council chamber was silent for the first time in centuries. Not a single delegate spoke. Not a claw, a scale, or a crystalline hand moved. The photograph of the sleeping child floated at the center, her peaceful chest rising and falling. Small fingers curled into a fist, unaware of the fate she now held in her tiny hand. The galaxy had changed. The protests on distant worlds had grown unstoppable. Citizens defied their leaders not with weapons but with the power of life itself. Every whisper from humanity and laughter, songs, poems, descriptions of sunrises, acts of kindness had reached across the stars, igniting a spark of doubt and empathy the Council could not extinguish. The head of security paced, claws clicking against the chamber floor. Fury burned in his eyes, but even he could not deny the truth. The galaxy was no longer united under his authority. Fleets that once enforced obedience now faced hesitation, refusal, rebellion. Humanity had not fired a single shot, yet they had dismantled fear itself. The diplomatic chair rose, her translucent form glowing faintly. "Look around you," she said. "Our citizens question us. They whisper of life, of care, of resilience. We cannot destroy what has already awakened. Force cannot undo what understanding has begun. The humans have shown us something far stronger than fleets. They have shown us truth. They have shown us life." Murmurs spread through the chamber. Some delegates tried to argue. Some remained angry. Some ashamed. But the weight of the galaxy's conscience pressed heavily upon them. They could no longer act purely from pride or fear. Doubt had won its place in their hearts. On Earth, Kira Hale watched the final reports arrive. The protests, the whispers, the defiance, and the galaxy itself was holding the Council accountable. Humanity had survived every attempt to silence them. And now, for the first time, they had the Council's attention. She turned to her team. Omar, Lena, and a handful of others watched her silently. "They will decide soon," Kira said. "Not because they fear us. Not because they are weak. Because life is stronger than certainty, and they cannot erase it. Humanity has shown them the truth. We exist, we endure. We will not kneel." Omar's eyes sparkled. "So what do we say to them finally?" Kira picked up the photograph once more, letting the soft light of the mountain room fall across the child's peaceful face. "We do not negotiate. We do not plead. We simply exist. And when they finally speak, we answer with clarity." Her fingers tapped the console, sending one final deliberate message across the galaxy. "We do not kneel. We do not vanish. We are human. Teach us well." In the Council chamber, the message appeared on every screen, every relay, every feed. There was no punctuation of fear, no flourish of threat, only the calm, unyielding statement of humanity's existence. Silence followed. The galaxy waited. The head of security trembled. The diplomatic chair held her glow steady, and the younger delegates whispered among themselves. The citizens on distant worlds inspired by humanity held their breath as well. For the first time, authority was not defined by fleets or weapons, but by the moral clarity of life itself. And the council made its choice. They would not destroy humanity. They could not. They could threaten, they could bargain, they could attempt to intimidate, but the truth was irreversible. A species that refused to vanish, that persisted with courage, laughter, and love, could never be erased. The council would learn a hard lesson that day. Empathy and life were stronger than fleets, authority, or fear. And humanity, cold, brilliant, and unflinching, had delivered it with no weapons at all. Only the quiet power of existence. Across the stars, whispers continued. Citizens of alien worlds carried the message forward. Humanity's words, images, and life itself became a symbol, a reminder that no empire, no council, no fleet could erase what is alive, what is stubborn, and what is unwilling to kneel. On Earth, Kira Hale finally allowed herself a small smile. Humanity had survived the ultimatum. They had faced the galaxy's greatest powers and emerged victorious without violence, without begging, and without compromise. The message was simple, but it was absolute. We do not kneel. We do not vanish. We are human. Teach us well. And the galaxy, for the first time in millennia, listened.